Thanks, Phoenicia. I know that's going to be a packed session, so we have a large room. We encourage you to get there early so you can get a spot. Next up, I'm going to call Laura Hewitt with the Division of Child Development, also a member of our Afterschool Professional Development Work Group, to speak to the competencies and their alignment with licensure.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm a policy consultant with the Division of Child Development, and what I have done is gone through the competencies and compared them to the North Carolina child care licensing requirements. And when I did that, I looked not only at the minimum standards for licensing for child care, but also at the basic school age care training that is required in our minimum standards for group leaders and assistant group leaders and administrators who help plan the program. And then I also looked at SACRS, the school age care environmental rating scale, because it's required in our enhanced standards. So as you can see, did you all get this handout? I had it in the back that had, it says North Carolina After School Professional Core Competencies, and it says it's a comparison to the child care licensing requirements. So I'm just going to briefly go through that with you. I'll let those get settled. As you can see on the handout, what I did at the first part is list similarities to the North Carolina licensing requirements. Most of the content areas in the competencies are covered in the North Carolina licensing requirements and SACRS and BSAC. So many times it is not covered as extensively as in the competencies, but the topic areas are covered in one way or another, except in two areas that I noticed. Child youth observation and assessment, that content area is really not addressed in rule. In SACRS, it's addressed lightly in BSAC, but not, again, not as extensively as in the competencies. And then also engaging families, schools, and communities. That's another content area that's not really addressed in rule at this time. Now, both of those content areas, the division does have an interest in. We have a quality rating and improvement system that is essentially our 5-star license, and so we have a committee that's looking at the QRIS and considering ways to improve it. And so two of the content areas that they're looking at in the program standards work group is the child youth observation and assessment and engaging families, schools, and communities. The challenge with that, with the child youth observation and assessment, that category is it will require extensive training on teachers, and so at this time we're having to delay pursuing that just because of the money it would take to train all the staff across the state. If you flip over to the next page, one difference in philosophy that I noticed in the content areas was in the child youth growth and development category. In the competencies, they allow and encourage multiple approaches to after-school programs, and really in the way our rule is written and the way SACRS evaluates programs, they're looking at another particular way, one particular way of I'm trying to think of the way to term it, structuring a program. They like to see a variety of activities in a program in order to address a lot of child outcomes. And what the competencies do is it allows for that, but it also allows for programs to solely focus on academics or solely be a sports program and that kind of thing. And we don't really encourage that at the division at this time. It's just not in there at this point. So that's a difference that I saw. If you go on down to promoting physical development, I know a big difference in that is in the core competencies, they use and promote the use of Move More North Carolina recommended standards for after-school physical activity. And the big difference between the Move More standards and our standards is that they say that in after-school programs, they want programs that operate for 4 or less hours to have physical activity for 20% of the time, whereas what we say is if they're there about 30 minutes if it's under 4 hours. I'm sorry, with with the Move More standards, they say 20% of the program time period. And what we say is 30 minutes of outside time if you're there for 4 or less hours. If you're there for more than 4 hours, say they're there for a track out day or whatever, we expect them to go out for at least an hour. So it's just a slight difference there in the physical development category. Another area that the competencies cover that we don't really address in the minimum requirements, SACRs, or basic school age care is communication skills. In the competencies, they really go into a lot of specifics about children and after-school programs being taught language acquisition skills and communication skills such as active listening, verbal skills, respectful communication. They even go into talking with language specialists in order to help develop children who have particular needs in communication. And so they go into a lot more detail, whereas in SACRs and in our rules, we talk about interactions and interacting with children, but that's more to talk about nurturing care rather than developing communication skills. We talk about it a little bit, to talk about problem solving and negotiating and address communication slightly, but that wasn't the true full intent of what we were trying to do. On the next page, and this is, remember earlier we talked about where we don't really address that much family, school, and community collaboration. And creative expression was just another area where they talked about community collaboration. They said in the core competencies, they invite specialists to incorporate arts into the curriculum. Well, we don't talk about that. It's not that we don't think that would be a great idea. It's just not addressed right now. And so one thing for us to think about having these competencies available is as we move towards evaluating our QRIS system, we can look at this and see what areas that we're weak in and can maybe develop it a little bit further. Let's see. The interactions with children and youth, it was basically, they had different ideas on guidance and behavior guidance, but the same philosophy, it was very similar. I didn't see a notable difference. The big difference is that in the competencies, they also address group management, whereas in SACRs and in the rules, we address managing children's behaviors, but we don't really talk about it in terms of a group process. And on the very back, the child care requirements involve now, as of last year, we incorporated a rule where we want youth to be involved in the planning of the program, but it does not suggest including youth in program evaluation. So that's just, they extended that slightly different. So they're not comprehensive. Those are the major similarities and differences I saw when reviewing those documents.